Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's
Salam.
always an honor and pleasure to interact with my former colleagues in Malaysia and other countries of the world. And I'm thankful to Stack for inviting me to share my ideas on this very earning topic. At the same time, I believe that academia, particularly institutes like Stack, have to play a leading role in not only this topic we are dealing today, but a number of topics Muslim Ummah is facing, youth particularly. I'll try to keep my discourse as brief as possible and try to have more time for our interaction. To begin with, when we talk about gender equity, the first question that comes to my mind is, what do we mean by equity and by equality? Equality has been the catchword for past several decades in academia, and economists, anthropologists, sociologists have been coming up with lots of data which indicates that women folk are very much behind in the so-called capitalistic development model. The model in which I was born and raised is no different than what we hear today from many young social scientists. And that model has been to judge development, enlightenment, justice, everything based on certain assumptions. Among those, first and foremost, is that those countries where English, French, German, or Dutch is used at high frequency, they are more educated. And those countries where their native language is used, they are backward countries. And similarly, if some countries are using high tech, which is so common in the West, then these are advanced and developed countries. And if some countries are using methods and techniques which are not that advanced, these are backward. And consequently, the HDI or other indices are determined, like quality of life, in terms of what is understood in Paris, in London, or in New York. Therefore, when we talk about equality, it means that equality which has now become common in Europe and America. Not that equality, quote unquote, which was there 1 century back in same countries. Because these countries which we talk about as advanced countries were in forefront of oppressing women for a long period. Still, because of rebellion from women and because of economic conditions, they had to change their policies and claim that now they have achieved equality. Although the available data tells us that even with this claim of equality, the social status, psychological status, cultural status has not been improved much. My first question that comes to my mind is, when we talk about equity, do we mean equity in terms of their legal status, or in terms of labor market, in terms of data that tells us that 50% of men, 50% of women are working in industrial sector? And if that happens, does that mean quality of life has increased? Does that mean that human values which are common to mankind, honesty and fairness and compassion and sacrifice, are these values uh, on the rise or they are disappearing. And same, family is a foundational value in any civilization. Uh, has the economic development, technological development, educational uh, data tells us that now we have more women educated, and because of that, we have better family environment, we have less divorces, we have less family fights, we have less use of violence. If all these are put together, then I wonder we shall have to redefine these terms. Therefore, my first concern is when talk about equity or equality, what do we mean? Equality to me is a quantitative term which makes a head count and tells us that now the number is nearly equal and therefore we are developed. Equity, in my view, is a matter of fairness and justice. And that's what I find is the approach taken by the Quran, which was my topic. The Quran has taken a very simple approach, which is nearest to human nature, and that is instead of depending on only physical factors, all physical factors have to be subservient to the ethical and moral factors. Therefore, marriage, which is something very, very secular in the West and the East, in most of the non Muslim cultures or Islam, is a completion of faith. It is not a matter of physical needs of male and female, which is there anyhow. But the basis is not physical need. Basis is to complete my faith. Faith is incomplete without that. And that means value. That means certain ethical aspects. Similarly, economic development, indices tell us that a country is agricultural, technological, high tech, IT, and so on and so forth. But Islamic Quranic approach is that whatever you are doing has to be essentially filtered with two terms. Is it halal or haram? Halal does not mean halal toothpaste, but halal means those resources, that system in which you have no oppression, no exploitation, no wage distortion, no inequality in terms of the working hours for women and men are same, but their wages are different. And that exists today in North America, in Europe, everywhere. Therefore, when we talk about development or progress in education, in health, in empowerment, making decisions, then unfortunately, our parameters are exactly the same which have been given to us by our former colonizers. Muslim countries which were colonized for over 100, 200 years have not been able to yet liberate themselves from that colonial heritage. The Quran, in my understanding, is the first document in modern history that tells us that the benchmark for superiority is not your gender. The whole gender lens approach means that you bring these male and female gender at a equilibrium in terms of physical head count in industry, in education, in health, or in professional areas like in medical science or flying an airplane. If you have 50% number of pilots female, then you are developed. This is a pure quantitative approach, has nothing to do with holistic human development. What counts for us is not just material count, but what is the civilizational and cultural achievement. If with all economic development, we lose our civilization and culture, then it's a sheer loss and not gain. Therefore, the Quran focuses on some principles. And first principle is that adl has to be done. And adl does not mean equality. Adl means you give to a person what a person deserves. Therefore, a professor who is working for 15 years to develop a theory, it's not a matter of an experiment in chemical lab or in a physics lab. It's a matter of theory development. And that takes 15 years. And he's working day and night. He sleeps hardly 3 or 4 hours. And a person who is working in a factory producing shoes or mobiles, if we take the economic approach, then in terms of number of hours, in terms of man hours, and in terms of production, we reward the person. But this person has taken 15 years and that person is producing in an assembly line every day 2000 shoes. So how you are going to equate the person? Equity means that you have to evaluate a product, a thought, as well as a physical object in terms of how much time, how much effort, how much creativity, how much functional benefit, how much impact on society, not just economic benefit, but society. Therefore, unless we take a holistic approach, we cannot decide is it adl or not. So the Quran wants a holistic approach which is ethical, not just legal. The so-called objectives of Sharia are essentially ethical axioms, norms, and values which guide every single legal step in Islamic civilization. And therefore, adl becomes first and foremost value on which one has to decide. Should a female who has different physical structure of body as compared to human beings go through same stress in a job and produce same output, or in view of her capacity you put her in a place where she can be more productive? Economic development demands that all labor should be treated equal, but Islamic economic thought will require that you find out where a person in your economic production line is more suitable and where you are not harming the person's individual life, social life, and family life. All these aspects are to be considered. Otherwise, it's an oppressive economic system which is extracting from the labor what it wants, but harming, destroying, and destructing the labor. Therefore, the values or the value system of the Quran tells us that adl must be done. And then, instead of saying that men and women are equal, it publicly declares that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given tafdeel to some and the other. A person who has better skills in computing as compared to an artist who uses his brush and makes a beautiful painting of nature, or a person who his vocal cords can recite the Quran in the most melodious way, and a person who can write but cannot use his vocal cords, how you are going to equate everyone? Therefore, adl means to a person what one deserves or needs, and that is objective and not subjective. Secondly, the whole concept of life, not looking from male lens or female lens, but looking from the lens of ethics and morality. What is more ethical? Is it more ethical to have in a police force 50% boys, 50% girls, and put them in combat group against a writing mob and ask them to go and beat them up and get killed? Or you want to have persons who have more physical resistance as compared to some others? It's not gender discrimination. It's a matter of capacity. It's a matter of fairness. It's a matter of dealing with people with compassion. Therefore, values, maruf, good, what is bir, all these values which are given by the Quran and Sunnah tell us that a female does not have to be equal to a male, but she has every capacity to excel over 10,000 males in her intellectual capacity, analytical capacity, productivity, and yet it is not female chauvinism or male chauvinism. Unfortunately, the current scenario is that what used to be male chauvinism is becoming female chauvinism. What used to be the domain of men is now declared to be the domain of women. And unless they prove they are more strong in that domain, that people and that country is backward. Now, this is a illogical, unscientific, unrealistic approach, which is being propagated under SDGs and whatever you call them. Those SDGs which are designed and made in Paris and New York and London, keeping in view their own problems, are imposed on the world in the name of economic colonialism. It's no different than a colonial approach which was prevalent for so many years. Therefore, when we talk about gender equity, then we have to use a different paradigm. It is not the empirical capitalist paradigm of the West. It is the ethics centered or ethico legal concepts of the Quran, which are summarized in what I call the 7 basic principles, starting with the principle of Tawheed, which requires unity in life, not in the sense of just believing in Allah, but a unified life, a life which is not dualistic, a life which is not conflicting, a life which is not hypocritical, but a life which is transparent. And that means this unity or Tawheed is not a monopoly of Muslims. This means this principle is universal, and a Chinese, a Buddhist, a Malay, an Indonesian, a Turk coming from North Africa or anywhere else, all of them have to make sure that whether they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or their own God, but is their life divided in conflicting approaches and manners, or their life is unified? The unified life is what Tawheed wants. If industry creates a conflict in this, the industry is non-Tawheedic. If education creates, it's non-Tawheedic. If education builds up your mind where you have a divide of secularity and religiosity, then this is an un-Islamic paradigm. Islam does not allow this division of sacred and secular. It declares the whole universe is under Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command, hakimiyya, and this whole earth is made mosque for Muslims. So there is no secular space left anywhere. Therefore, Tawheed is not just a matter of a doctrine, a theology, but it has to be applied in industry, in education, in creative activities. And secondly, I said earlier, justice or adl, which requires again a different approach, the approach of a comprehensive view about what are the capacities and are we utilizing them or exploiting them. And then the conventional five objectives. I put these two at the top. In my classification, I have seven basic objectives or basic principles, which are the guiding principles for any act done, not in Sharia, but in life. These are objectives of humanity, not just Sharia. And as such, I maintain, and I've been writing on that, that global ethics is only provided by these seven principles, and that replaces a gender-based world vision where a gender race takes place in industry, in education, in health. But it tells us that if in uh, uh, nursing you need to have 90% or 95% females and 5% male, this is justice. While it's very much unfair in terms of equality. And same in some areas, if you need 95% males and 5% female, this is adl. It's not injustice, it's equity. Therefore, Islamic principles provide different paradigm. It's not just thinking from that mindset in which you and me are born. You have to come out of your cocoon, as I tried for so many decades and came out with Alhamdulillah. You have to liberate yourself from this empiricist paradigm in which everything is quantified. Human love is quantified, art is quantified, everything is quantified. What we need is a qualitative approach where you have to look for what are the basic ethical principles which are not ambiguous, not unclear. These are very well defined, specific objectives for the whole of humanity. So, to cut short my discussion, and I want to have more time for questions, what I'm telling here is that the gender based approach is essentially an outcome of individualism where the so-called empowerment, the so-called Me Too approach, everything centered on me, is essentially a manifestation of capitalist individualistic approach of life, while the Islamic approach is, if you want to evaluate value of life, quality of life, it's not just by what's the size of your home or what's the length of your automobile or how many spaghetti highways you have, but it's a matter of, do you have peace of mind? Do you have love and compassion in home? Do you have respect in home? Do you find people who are elderly are not sent out to the senior citizen homes, but you yourself take care of them and keep vigil to take care of them and feel pleased in that? Don't feel burdened and taxed by that. It's a valuational change. And unless the revival of Islamic values is done, it's my very considered opinion that we are heading towards destruction of humanity in the name of so-called equality, in the name of so-called rights. Islam gave all these rights in the Quran to us. Nowhere in the Quran you find inequality. Nowhere. And I challenge even the Quranic ayat that talk about law of evidence, that talk about inheritance, that talk about so many aspects. I have written on that, and I find that none of those ayat can be the basis of saying discrimination, inequality.
Prof. Salis.